do with the White Russians, and Bolsheviks, and the Mensheviks about a certain revolution as that many not British, Israeli prime ministers had changed their names. But there was a part in history where I remember learning about a certain revolution, and a lot of these guys changed their names. And I'm trying to remember, it had something to do with the White Russians, and Bolsheviks, and the Mensheviks. Oh, the Bolshevik Revolution, right? Vladimir Lenin, that wasn't his name, right? Joseph Stalin, that wasn't his name. There's a bunch of guys that changed their name, and it was like a thing. And I noticed that same thing in the creation of the Zionist era, like Ben Gurion, right? These sort of names, they carry a more Middle Eastern weight than probably their Polish names or Austrian names or these other Eastern European names. So that does makes sense. It just doesn't make sense why they wouldn't disclose it. You know, why does no one talk about BB being from Philadelphia, having American roots? Maybe he was sent there to do what he's doing now. You know, there are some connections. BB did have a godfather, and we'll get to that in a second, but I want to get to Scott and see if he had any thoughts on what we were just perusing before we get into the Godfather. Not
Oh
the
man.
Italian one. Not the Italian one either.
Um, I'm curious to know what you have to say about this. I don't know.
All right. So
Yeah.
this is from 2009, and let me put the reference at the top. It's EIR, Executive Intelligence Review, Volume 36, Number 3, January 23rd, 2009. That's how you could look it up. How British imperialists created the fascist Jabotinsky. Now, Jabotinsky is Netanyahu's godfather, not grandfather, godfather, and Netanyahu's dad, Ben Zion Netanyahu, worked with Jabotinsky. So if we could figure out who this Jabotinsky guy is, because he's well, let me dip in instead of repeating the obvious. Vladimir Zev Jabotinsky, 1880 to 1940, the patron saint of Israel's Likud party, like the patron saint of the people who wanted to see Yitzhak Rabin be assassinated, who also created revisionist Zionism. So that would be this, the Irgun, history of terror. This is how their country was founded, right? So revisionist Zionism started by Jabotinsky, Vladimir Jabotinsky, who also created revisionist Zionism, and Chaim Weizmann. Remember him? He was a prime minister. We talked about him last week. He was mentored by the 17-year-old Dorothy Rothschild. We put that evidence on the record last week. The decades-long chairman of the World Zionist Organization. And we're going to get into the British connection right here, who was seen as the prime minister in exile of a Jewish Palestine that didn't exist, were both witting champions of the British Empire. They were instruments of Lord Alfred Milner and Leo Stennett Amory, the final authors of the Balfour Declaration, who craftily used them to secure British rule over Palestine, a place that Ron DeSantis says doesn't exist, but the British had to take it over anyway, as part of the 1916 Sykes-Picot agreements. Now, there's some other minutia here, but the points I want to bring out in this, zoom back out so you can see what I'm going through. Modern Zionism in the British Empire does have a substantial history, and it's not this page that I want to break into, but it's there for your edification if you would like to learn more. It is over here on page 38. This is under the section of Jabotinsky's Imperial Roots. And I would like to just cut, well, yes, I want to cut the two paragraphs out. It just says Likud loves him because he's the godfather. Jabotinsky at the bottom was a wholly owned and created asset of, zooming in for you, the British Empire. He was controlled by a political network led by Leo Amery, who became Britain's most prominent imperial spokesman and political organizer. Amory's circle included the greatest names in Britain imperialism: Cecil Rhodes, the self-avowed enemy of the American Republic; the Coefficients Group, Alfred Milner, Rhodes's mentor, who ran Rhodes's secret society. So the Anglo-American establishment is running this guy, Jabotinsky. Jabotinsky and the creation of the Jewish Legion became Amory's #1 project as the British moved to take over Palestine, a place that Ron DeSantis said that didn't exist, at the close of World War I. Amory's vision was that of Cecil Rhodes, who in 1877 wrote his first last will and testament. Only a bit more than a decade had passed since the British plan to dismember the United States in a civil war had failed bitterly. Rhodes, a rabid British raced imperialist, had amassed a fortune through the exploration and mining of gold in South Africa, also diamonds. Rhodes wrote that the purpose of his will was to, quote, to and for the establishment, promotion, and development of a secret society, the true aim and object whereof shall be the extension of British rule throughout the world, the perfecting of a system of emigration from the United Kingdom, and colonization by British subjects of all lands, especially the entire continent of Africa, the Holy Land, right? That would include Palestine. That doesn't exist according to Ron DeSantis. So anyway, it goes down, it continues on. Rhodes' Secret Society, the intricacies of how it operated and are detailed in Carol Quigley's The Anglo-American Establishment and Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time. Quigley describes the British power elite and the purpose of the turn of the century. So anyway, those same people, they, them, those who can easily be named and have been named for years, are behind the creation of the party that is presently empowering Mr. Netanyahu to do the genocide thing continually. And let me just go down to this part here. From the Jewish Legion to Berchtesgaden, that means Nazis. They're working with the Nazis. These guys that are working Jabotinsky, they're also working with Hitler, which is interesting because they keep saying Hamas is Hitler and stuff like that. In August 1935, more than a year after Hitler's Night of the Long Knives, his purge of the Nazi Party, where they got rid of some of their own people, and only 2 months after the signing of the British-German naval agreement that allowed Germany to rebuild its navy, big deal, Amory met with Hitler. Amory gave Hitler his advice on how to strengthen the German economy. Amory's diary, dated August 13, 1935, reads as follows. And he details the meeting with Hitler and the Nazis. These are the same guys that created what is today the Likud Party. So when we talk about Zionism during the Holocaust, it's not just a couple Zionists working with Hitler. It's the people who put the Zionists in power and put Palestine up for ransom or whatever they're doing with it. You also have later in this article, both Weitzman, who was, again, mentored by 17-year-old Rothschild, Dorothy Rothschild, and Jabotinsky were steered by British intelligence operatives who were Christian Zionists. Weitzman's confidant, and the only non-Jewish member of the Palestine executive was Blanche Baffy Dugdale. Dugdale was the go-between for Weitzman and the British royal family and Anglo-Dutch elites. Trained as a naval intelligence expert during World War II, she founded the League of Nations Union, right? So this woman right here, Blanche Dugdale, that's interesting that she's this go-between. She's Weitzman's confidant. She's working with Christian Zionists, because do you know that Tiny Mustache Man, he wrote his book in German and the rest of the world doesn't read German. So people couldn't read his book, but thanks to Blanche, let me just type it in over here. I'm going to just type in Dugdale into the history blueprint. Dugdale, Edgar, and Blanche, Balfour, Dugdale. Now, let me just check the names and make sure they're the same before I go dragging her through the mud. Blanche, Baffy, Dugdale. Dugdale, Blanche, Balfour. Okay. All right, so we're going to go with it. She and her husband bring Mein Kampf into English in 1925. So they can't make a big deal about Tiny Mustache's man agenda until it's in English for people to read. And the same people that brought the Zionists to power also brought Mein Kampf into English. Can you hear me in the back? Maybe you should read some history. Jesus Christ. Oh, we can't even say that. That's probably anti-Semitic too. we're getting ourselves into the Baffy Taffy here with Dugdale. So anyway, fact inconvenient to what ruling elites want to tell you about how the world works. You run a state, have at it. I'll be the forensic historian, and we'll both do our thing, right? So I'll stay out of telling people how to run states, maybe, and you tell people like maybe to watch Grand Theft Auto. That'd be great. That'd be happy.